This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not medical or legal advice. Always follow your local policies, procedures, and protocols when functioning in your respective profession. Additionally, the views expressed by the speakers and owners of this podcast are their own and do not represent the views of their respective employers. Listener discretion is advised.
Alert Medic 1 response.
Ken, Josh, and Mustafa here. Welcome back to the Alert Medic 1 podcast.
All right, we're live.
Take it away, Cody.
I started. All right. Hey, buenos noches. Good day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Alert Medic 1 podcast. We've got a really special episode for you guys tonight. We've got the one and only Dr. Trevor Wilkins, also known as the Angry Viking Therapist. Cue crowd noises. Dr. Wilkins is coming from a 15-year law enforcement background. Is that right, Doc? He's a dispatcher, an EMT, firefighter, all checks all the boxes, and then had a career evolution and became a therapist or clinical psychiatrist. Which one?
Psychotherapist. Yep.
Psychotherapist.
They all sound the same. Yep.
So a cop turned PhD, and Doc, I'm going to turn this over to you to kind of unpack some of the nuances of your background and your story, kind of give us an idea of who you are.
Sure. Yeah. I started volunteering in kind of the EMS world at 16. I was in high school. We moved a lot, and I had come across an Explorer program, which most of us know Explorer program as kind of being the police side. That's what I was used to or had heard as a kid. And we found one for medical stuff, and some of the groups in it wanted to be doctors or surgeons. Well, I was interested in EMS, so that allowed me to do a bunch of ride-alongs on the weekends. Probably looking back to an annoyingly amount of ride-alongs. I learned a lot from those guys, but I hope I wasn't too pestering. In fact, when I got my PhD years later, I called them and just kind of generally let them know how influential they were on my life, kind of growing up and where I was. So I did a bunch of ride-alongs, like 16 to 18. I knew that's what I was interested in. Because of those ride-alongs, the director of EMS there, small town where I grew up, he taught the EMT class locally. So he allowed me, since he knew me, to take my EMT class when I was a senior in high school at a community college. So I finished that. Took the NREMT when I was 17, had to wait till 18, of course, to work. And then did EMS for a while. Went away to college and in Texas, where I'm from, went to Texas Tech University. As I like to say, I stayed there for a year only because I found out that I like Lone Star beer and Texas girls more than I liked class, and they don't go together. So I failed out of that miserably. And I was
the girls part or the school part?
Well, probably more of the school. I think doing well with the girls was the problem,
Check.
Yep. So
it's a win.
Right. So it felt like it at the time, but so I'm about 18 or 19 at this point. I'm getting interested in the law enforcement side while still working in EMS. So I got a job as a dispatcher in my hometown, did that for a couple of years, turned 21, joined a law enforcement agency. And that was kind of it. That was my dream. That's what I wanted to do. Eventually left there and came to Kentucky, where I'm at now. I had some family out here. We came out over Christmas and liked it. So I applied to some agencies, got on with a larger city department of about 600 officers, stayed there for 4 years, and then ended up going to the state police. They used to be separated, the commercial traffic division versus the call taking division. We're not a highway patrol here. So they take all the calls in the unincorporated parts of the state. So eventually those merged together, and I did most of my time with the state police here in Kentucky. About 15 years in, things were going very poorly for me mentally and in life, and I'm sure we'll get into that in more detail. But I lost my job because of that, and I had no skills, no training, no degree, nothing. So honestly went to school to kind of figure out what was wrong with me, and it turned into a pretty cool job. So this is what I do now.
Man, it's such an awesome story. So a fellow Texan that went to EMT school in high school, like me, and then went on with life after that. It's like we were separated at birth almost. No, I'm kidding.
Maybe.
I ran across Dr. Wilkins, maybe a video that came across Facebook when I was on the book, or maybe across Instagram, and I was like, angry Viking therapist. So I watched the video and I went, yep, definitely. And then you pop back up on, excuse me, Pat McNamara's podcast.
Yep. Yeah.
The University of Badassery. And if you guys that are listening to this haven't checked that one out, there's some awesome nuggets on that podcast as well. And I've kind of been hooked on your stuff ever since. And so you've got a couple of tools in your toolbox that I'm super interested in. I just want to get right into them.
Sure.
That got my attention. EMDR being one of them. Having done it and reaped the benefits of it, incredible. I was like, what is this nonsense? And sat through the sessions and did the work, and I won't say all better, but it seemed to work for me. How does EMDR work? What is it? And how does that work? And how does that help folks in our profession? How does that help us get back in the saddle, so to speak?
Yeah, I'm always down to talk about it. I will add one thing. The University of Badassery podcast was kind of one of my first, and I was really new to the profession still. I just opened my own practice, and CJ Ortiz, who's Pat's kind of counterpart on that, calls me. And I don't know this guy from Adam except for some videos, calls me. They asked me to come out. I did a speaking engagement that day and then did their podcast. And I called my wife because, all I was ever supposed to be was just a cop, man. I wanted to make captain one day and kind of ride off into the sunset in retirement. Like that was my dream, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever I was going to do. And we get to talking about it. And this has become a life theme for me because I get to do all these cool things now. I think it was Dave Chappelle that was on a talk show one time talking about somebody he had met. And the guy said it was, my life is dope and I do dope shit. So that's what we came up with on that phone call that day. So, I'm sitting in this location with a couple people I look up to, Pat McNamara and CJ, and just thinking like, man, my life is dope and I do dope shit. It's pretty cool. So, so the EMDR part. So EMDR itself stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That name has kind of changed over the years since Shapiro started it. It started out with just the eye movements. It's moved to a lot of different things. But the understanding of EMDR and what I like about it is it kind of hits my neurobiology interest of what trauma does. I kind of think of mental health in two columns. So one of those is this neurobiology, EMDR kind of helping side. And the other one I'm sure we'll talk about later is kind of the rational therapy thinking side, I call it. So we know with trauma that things change. We know this through brain scans. We know that the amygdala and the hippocampus change sizes when we deal with high stress or lots of trauma. We know it gets that limbic system or that fight or flight brain kind of stuck in the on position. We know that both from brain scans and from the way that we respond and react to things like they're emergencies when they're not. So what EMDR does is two or threefold. And a lot of the things we've been able to prove through from brain scans and know what's going on. Some of it we're pretty sure we know what's going on, but it's helping either way. So adding bilateral stimulation to the processing of a trauma memory, that's where the eye movement comes in. And there's other ways to do it, like sound and some visuals and different things you can do and some tactile things. But processing a traumatic memory led by a therapist while adding bilateral stimulation, one, we notice it keeps you calmer when you're processing it. And you're processing this memory really from kind of one side of your brain to the other. Now, this is the part that's kind of, you can't really prove it on a brain scan. We know what it's doing, but we don't have a way exactly to explain the whys. But what I like to say about that is this right side of your brain, kind of this chaos side of your brain, is where all that stuff is stuck. Because on the left side of your brain is the logic side of your brain. And that's where everything sits, like how to change a tire, what you do on a call, what do you do during a code. Those feel like emergencies, but really the information is just sitting over there that you draw from. Well, what box do you put really traumatic things in? There's not really a box or a shelf from that on that left side, on that logic side. So what EMDR does by adding bilateral stimulation to the processing of a memory once we reactivate it is it kind of gets it put away back on that left side, back in that box, back on the shelf where it belongs. And it's just a crappy memory, as opposed to being stuck on this right side, this chaos side, where you're constantly processing incoming information, where it gets stuck like kind of a raw nerve. And if you've ever had kids fall and scrape their knees on the concrete, It's a raw nerve. You don't have to touch it to make it hurt. You can blow air in its general direction and it hurts. So we know that it kind of gets stuck on that side, on that right side and the chaos side. And there's lots of different names for that right side of the brain, but it gets stuck over there and we need to get it put away, just like you put everything else away in your life, but the brain's having trouble doing it. So what we know, that the other thing that we definitely have been able to prove through brain scans is that adding bilateral stimulation to the processing of a memory slows down the reaction of the limbic system. It slows down that fight or flight. Because if you're processing a memory or remembering a memory and you're stuck in fight or flight, you're not doing anything with it, right? It's just stuck there. So that's the technical jargon side. That's the what's going on in the brain. What I really like to say about EMDR is that a lot of our dysfunctions, our mental health dysfunctions, this anger, this anxiety, this depression, this guilt that we have over these calls that it keeps causing, they're created by previous life events that left us feeling helpless, hopeless, or not good enough. And when I first heard those words, I work with a very type A group of people, and I thought, I'm gonna have to change those words. You call me helpless in a bar, it's probably not going to go well for you. So we don't like to be called helpless, hopeless, or not good enough. Well, I didn't change them. And it turns out that every time I talk to a public safety member, military member, type A person like me, and I say, you're stuck feeling helpless, hopeless, and not good enough, they all lower their head and go, yeah, when you put it like that, that's exactly how I feel about that call. I know we did the best we could. I know there's nothing more we could have done. I know we got there as fast as we could. I know there was no way to stop this, but I still feel helpless and hopeless and not good enough about this call or this event or this life event. So the things that happen in our life help shape the way that we see things. And when you look at it from that traumatic lens, it's no real surprise that things go to this fight or flight. Whether you're recognizing it as that or not, it's no real surprise. So what EMDR does is, in its simplest form, and there's a million technical things we can say about it, but in its simplest form, we reactivate the memory, provide bilateral stimulation, and your brain is able to process that. There's one more piece that I think is really important with EMDR that I think it technically does, and this is where it started to make a lot of sense to me. If I have you bring up a traumatic memory, it's right there in your face, in color. You can see it. It's hard to deal with. It gives you emotions. But what I found is when we reactivate that memory in a certain way, in the safety of an office or online, and we provide bilateral stimulation, it's almost like it's distracting to your brain or your body, right? So instead of it being right here, we're providing the stimulation that kind of confuses your brain, right? It's constantly moving your brain. And then we reintroduce this traumatic event. Well, it's, to me, in the way that I look at it and put it, it's really hard to be stuck on this event while my brain's getting pulled a different direction. So it's almost like you're being fed this traumatic event in a very different lens. In fact, what I've heard a lot about EMDR for people is, hey, it took it from right here in my face in color and put it back here in black and white. It's still there.
Yeah.
It's still horrible, but it's just back there. Or I had a gentleman one time that dealt with a really massive mass death situation that happened here many years ago. 49 people lost their life. And he said, it's almost like I see it with a Snapchat filter on it now. Like it's kind of got a goofy filter on it. It's still there. It's still hard. It's still sad, but it just doesn't slap me in the face every time that I think about it. And that is the way I like to describe EMDR. Again, there's tons of technical jargon and studies out there and specific things that it does, but that's what I've watched it do for people.
But that's kind of what it felt like for me when I went through it. And
speak from it, and I'm definitely on the right one.
So it's up to you guys, really, if you want to turn off the data now, or if we want to just do what we're doing, and then we'll see how we go. It's up to you guys.
Doc, that's kind of the way that I felt when I did it. It was they asked you to pull up the image, pull up the scene, pull up the call or whatever it is, and you're sitting, you're looking at it, right? It's like a video, like the old school movies with the reel, and you're watching it, and it moves out away from you, and I'm like watching this at a down a hallway, and you're just able eventually to just kind of scoot that memory where it's supposed to go. It was the most surreal and coolest thing I'd ever experienced in my life. It was so cool.
Yep. I hear a lot of those different things. Like I said, kind of, it put it in black and white. It took the sound away. It just feels like it's over there. It's definitely not a forgotten memory, in anything to that effect, but I think it makes it more palatable because obviously we're not trying to take a bad memory and either make it good or make it that it didn't really happen. We're just trying to get it to this place where it doesn't affect your daily function. And sometimes just being able to do that, even though it might still come up when you drive by a place or have another call that's similar, or when you're sitting alone on the couch one night, it may still come up. It just seems to have a different sting about it. And the big part is not only is that hard when that stuff comes up, but that becomes the filter for our life, right? We start seeing things through that filter that's not really fair to have that filter for.
And are those filters the helpless, hopeless, not good enough filters,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, those the real ones. It's easy to get to places of, most of us don't like the public a whole lot. Most of us don't trust people. Most of us are constantly looking for the worst to happen. And while some of those things are good, I always like to say that vigilance is fine. Hypervigilance is what is mentally and physically exhausting and ruins things, right? I still carry a firearm. I still have a med kit. I still, am prepared. I still don't like to be in crowds. I still don't like to sit my back to the door, but it doesn't take over my life anymore. It's not hyper vigilant anymore. So, and I think that's a big distinction that things like EMDR helps with. When I really got down to, and EMDR can be used for tons of different things. There's a lot of people that use it for depression, anxiety. I see it mostly for trauma being the biggest benefit. It's what was originally created for. So, and I see the most benefit out of that. But if that becomes our filter for life, we're in trouble.
Yeah, definitely. And it touches all the other parts of life, right? It's not just our job. It touches the home. It touches everything.
I'm connecting so much with this right now because, just going. So my wife and we've been together for 8 years. We just got married in September, and I remember one of the things that I remember thinking there was no issue with how I thought, and it was she's not in fire EMS, and she would, and I wasn't like too much of a dick. Like I wouldn't say it openly, but like it would come up in conversation and how I thought about things and how I reacted to things. And I would say that, did anyone die? If no one died, then it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, we met when I was 20 and she was, or no, I was 21 when she was 20. So like there was some maturing that occurred, but also I learned that part of that was me just kind of burnt. And sure, the objective reality is, yes, no one died, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't any less significant and enough to be something that she wanted to bring to me, as a partner. So I really appreciate that. I really appreciate also what you said about your interest in neurobiology, because that in my personal journey in mental health, something that I never would have thought would have helped me did. So I was a biology major, and one of the classes I took was neuroscience. And one of the experiments that we reviewed, one of the fundamental neuroscience things was this guy by the name of Eric Kandel did studies with aplesia and the role of how memories were saved, right? And he would basically, I can't remember what he did, but I think whether it was an electrical pulse or whatever, and then he looked at the neural network, that how it was restructured and how the aplesia remembered pain. And for whatever reason, I remember sitting in that lecture and thinking, holy shit, no wonder these things stick with me. And of course I was just obviously, there wasn't an actual, you might be able to tell us more about the actual physiological connection, but for me, it connected. And that was one of the big realizations in my life of, I'm not feeling that physical pain, but there is still emotional pain with what I'm seeing all the time. Because I was working as a paramedic at the time. So I just really appreciate you, really connect with a lot of the things you've said.
Yeah, it's good to know.
I'm one of the ones here that doesn't go to therapy. It's just, I have my own way of doing things, probably looking to do it here soon, but still, I remember hearing a story about EMDR. We used to have a clinical psychologist that was in our mental health section at work. And he talked about an employee that couldn't pick up his kid for years because of an experience on a call. And he did EMDR with him, a couple sessions of it, and completely changed this guy's life around. That's what kind of Cody was talking about. It just doesn't affect our life at work and our own, like, inside our own brain, it also affects our home life and how we interact with our family members, our children, our spouses, significant others, whatever. And it can have a pretty profound effect. And I mean, that's my one experience of the EMDR. I know my wife, who's a therapist, has talked about its uses and how well it works and just kind of the profoundness of it. So that's my little bit about EMDR. I have very little to contribute on this portion of the conversation.
Yeah, it's a big weight off shoulders. It is the simplest way. You know, we can talk about the brain stuff. We can talk about the filters. We can talk about how it works. But the reality is I see people's shoulders drop, you know, and they walk out of the room a little differently. And it could have been a call from a day ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And it's not, doesn't have to be something that people think of every day. It's just that we know that filter becomes such a problem. And when we feel that helpless, hopeless, not good enough, which again, I hated those words when I first heard it. Like, people aren't going to feel that way, until I did EMDR myself. And it was pretty clear that, you know, I didn't think it was a piece of trash. I wasn't depressed all the time. My problem was anger, but my anger was coming from the fact that I was covering up, feeling a lot of those things. And you talk about it not just being at work. People ask me all the time, do I have good memories in law enforcement? And I do. But the first thing I remember is those last 2 years sitting in the median in my cruiser, just mad as hell. I hated my bosses. I hated my coworkers. I hated my family. I hated the public. I hated everything. And while sitting there, I'm just begging for a stolen car to go by at 120 miles an hour, shooting a gun in the air, because that was no big deal. I was going to go chase them, probably have to pit them, might get in a shooting, throw them in jail or the hospital, do the paperwork, no big deal. That was no big deal to me, sitting in the median, angry all the time, feeling all these really crappy emotions was the hard part. And it wasn't just affecting me at work. And that's backwards, right? I should be in the median feeling pretty comfortable and getting in the middle of this stuff and feel anxious, nervous, concerned, but I would feel nothing. I was begging for those moments. And when I go back and I realize that I'm sure I had some depression, I'm sure I had some anxiety, but that was all covered for me with anger. Anger was my key to not feeling helpless, hopeless, and not good enough. And it even took me years of being a therapist and getting trained in EMDR and some of these other modalities that I use before I could really go, oh man, it is all connected, right? It's not just the crappy public or crappy supervisors. It's all connected together. And I was treating my family the same way I was treating bad guys at work.
I have a question. Cody, go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
Go.
So, as I've gone forward in my own journey in mental health, so I'm at the stage where I know I got to try it. So I have a weekly therapist I see, and I absolutely love her, but she doesn't do EMDR. Her thing's like yoga, and yoga is just not my thing, if you couldn't tell. So, she got me connected with a EMDR therapist. I'm actually on a wait list for them because she wanted me to go to a specific one. So that's where I'm at with EMDR. But my question is, as I've journeyed through my own mental health, I've learned that the trauma that I experienced and will probably continue to experience as long as I'm a paramedic does not function in isolation. It also is intertwined with a lot of stuff that have experienced as a kid. And as a therapist, in your profession, how should I ask this question? How do you help your patients untangle what is coming from, or what each of their, situations come from? I know that question wasn't worded well, but I hope you can pick it up. I feel like you will.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because here's the example that I would use, and I think it kind of fills in why it's so important. So one of the things that I think EMDR does, and I didn't know this for a long time, I think one of the things that EMDR does is reminds your brain that it's okay to be calm. So I had a fairly good childhood. We were extremely poor. We moved a lot. There were definitely some negative things, but I had two parents that never divorced. I was never abused. There was some anger in the house, but I wouldn't say to the point of abuse. I had a fairly safe childhood. We didn't have everything we wanted, but a fairly safe childhood. Well, what that does for me is when I get into those situations where I'm 0 to 100, or I'm in the middle of something, my brain recognizes that I can calm down. Things will be okay. I can get back to normal, homeostasis, parasympathetic, however you look at it, right? My brain knows I can get back there. If you had an abusive childhood or neglectful childhood or whatever that means for somebody, everybody's a little different, then then your brain may not know it's going to calm down. Your brain may not know how to deal with trauma. Your brain may not know how to get back to that safe percentage where you feel okay. Right? I see this in one of my specialties is adults with childhood trauma, and that's not what I originally kind of set out to treat. Although we treat all kinds of things in my office and online. We just have some specialties like trauma, but I would get these folks in that were dealing with trauma, and even if with EMDR, they were doing better, but it just didn't feel like they turned the corner. That light bulb wasn't going off. They weren't getting to a good place, even though we were doing big things. And then I would find out through the course of conversations, they were abused as a child or neglected, or for whatever reason had a rough childhood. So I actually ended up taking a class from one of my mentors that I learned EMDR from. I went back for another class that was specific for adults with childhood trauma. And in the first, I think it was like a 2-week class, in the first 5 minutes, he said, here's the difference. Adults with childhood trauma still have an umbrella of guilt and shame over the top of everything else, right? So until you deal with that umbrella of guilt and shame, you're never going to get to the nodes of these individual traumas, which is what we're hitting with EMDR to kind of give you an overall experience. If you're not getting rid of this umbrella, you're not going to deal with today's trauma. You're just not. Your brain doesn't know that it's ever going to be okay because you never experienced that. That was really cool and really career changing to hear in the first 5 minutes. I was also annoyed because I was ready to leave because I'd had the secret now. I'm glad I stayed and got more information, learned how to deal with it. But that was very eye-opening to me. And I'll tell you another place that I see it. Now, I can't speak a lot about these treatments. I know they're becoming very popular. I've had a lot of clients go and do things like ketamine treatments or MDMA treatments or ayahuascas. And they ask if it works. There's mixed results. Here's my opinion of where those things work best, because it's going to tie into this part of the conversation. Some people go do the ketamine treatments and it's good. It helps them process some trauma. And the ones that I see do the best on that kind of stuff are the ones that had a lifetime of bad experiences. They've never known that their body could be calm. They've never known that their brain could be calm, right? So SGB, same stellate ganglion block, fits in all this. The reason I think those work so well, and that I've seen just in my own observation, is when people have their brains and bodies have no idea how to be calm, no idea how to deal with that. So for the first time, you'll see them, their shoulders drop and they relax for the first time. And they talk about people that do EMDR. I've had them, this has happened a couple of times just recently. I did EMDR, and the guy, when we got done, he said, is it brighter in here, or am I just crazy? Like, it's not brighter, man. Your brain's just able to kind of not be in emergency mode, right? And you see more things, hear more things, which translates in life to being able to deal with more stress, being able to see some of the positives that we're just mired in this negative. And kind of the last way that I see that is, when we deal with traumatic events, our brain, our amygdala detects this emergency, kind of like a smoke alarm, and it does certain things for us. It speeds up our heart so we get more blood. We breathe faster to get more oxygen. Our body heats up so our tendons and ligaments won't tear. It's like we stretch going to a call. You get a dump of adrenaline, so you're stronger. It shuts your digestive system off, so you don't have to use the bathroom in an emergency, and it gives you tunnel vision. Well, what does an anxiety attack, a panic attack, or in my case, an anger attack look like? Heart racing, breathing fast, sweating for no reason, stomach's jacked up, shaking from adrenaline, and senses are messed up. So our body's doing that. It's supposed to be doing that. It's just doing it at the wrong time. And I think people start to hear that and realize, well, maybe I'm not completely screwed up. Maybe this is this is my neurobiology doing this. Maybe this is my body actually doing things, just doing it at the wrong time. And the last piece of that is that tunnel vision. This happens for almost everybody that I do EMDR with. When they talk about an event where it's childhood trauma, something they've responded to, and I ask them a question very specifically about what they're seeing, and they'll tell me, all I can see is this much of the call: the mom holding the baby, the car overturned, the gun pointed at me, the sound. They're seeing a very small piece that sticks out. And when we get done, this just happened a couple of weeks ago. I worked with a medic, and all he could see was the mom with the child in her arms. And when we got done, he said, "Man, this is so weird. Like, I can see the trees around her now. I can see the house behind her. I can see the house number." Because he was stuck on this tiny little piece of this traumatic event. And what EMDR allowed him to do didn't make the memory good. Still a hard memory that he had. Didn't make it not real. It just opened up from that pinpoint of being stuck in fight or flight, or that processing that little moment to, you know what, that was terrible, but I think we did the best we could. I can see it now. And that's when you see people's shoulders drop. And that's kind of that whole neurobiology side. I think EMDR does more than just the neurobiology. There's some talking and processing with it. But in my brain, like that's where I keep that, because it works so well for that area.
Yeah, there's definitely there's some there's some good examples to go back to the SGB thing. I believe Dakota Meyer talks about it on Jocko's podcast. That
he does,
when he had that done. And the Ride the Toad, there was two folks that I would never have expected. So Tony Robbins talks about it, and Mike Tyson talks about it.
Yeah.
And I went, man, I got to try this. And then, to kind of hear it now, I'm like, maybe that's a little bit heavy artillery for what I'm dealing with. Although it's on my list of experiences in life. But so what I hear a lot are words like chaos, anger, shame. And do you believe, or is it have you discovered that, like, we use anger as a way to control in chaos? Like, that's I was taught at one point, or not taught, but I was told that anger is kind of like the antidote to fear. If you're scared, you can get pissed off, and then you can move into that chaos. You can move into that situation, and then you can control it. And you come out on the other side of it. And kind of to your point, where that's the only place you can feel like you're in control, is in the chaos. Right.
That perfectly describes me. I call old me Angry Trevor, and the new me Dr. Trevor, because I try to keep them separate and not go back to that guy. But Angry Trevor was literally my nickname at the state. Like, that's what everybody called me. I was the guy that, of course, you could call at any time. I'd be there. I did whatever Sarge asked. I loved my job, or I enjoyed it for most of it. There were a couple rough years, but I was also the guy, looking back, that showed up and people were like, crap, man, this is about to go sideways, because Angry Trevor's coming out and he's going to get them all spun up. And at the time, I wore it like an honor. Like, right, hey, sometimes in my mind, in fact, I go back to a memory of my first academy. We had a lieutenant come in and was doing some kind of ethics class. I can't remember what it was. It's been so long, but he did like a little 20-question personality test, and you came out with a color. Like, white meant you were really good at talking to people and didn't lose your temper often. Yellow meant something. I was a red. Me and a guy that would later be one of my best friends were red. And he had to stand up, and he said, like, what do you think about that there's only two of you that are red? And I think what he was wanting me to say was like, maybe I need to work on my people skills a little bit, become better at that side. And what I said was, hey, sometimes you need a red around, like sometimes you need the red.
It's like the scene in Gladiator, right? Where they're getting the red dot and the yellow dot, and the red dots were the ones that ended up making it, and the yellow dots were kind of like the fodder. I see what you're saying.
At the time, at 21, 22 years old, and I still believe you got to have a little bit of that in you to do our professions. You got to have that, turn it off and go anyway. But I absolutely became, that over-responsive angry guy. And another way that I like to talk about anger, because this really was important to me in kind of personal growth. Not so much the EMDR side, but kind of in the middle. We all have our own rules and beliefs and thoughts and things that make us a good person, a good cop, a good fireman, a good dad, a good husband, good person. And everybody's is a little different, but that's your character, right? That's the character. And your character is who you said you would be at the time you said you'd be it to the people you said you'd be it to. And when you break character, because we all do, when you break character, you betray yourself. And betrayal is a big word, right?
That's where the shame comes from, right?
100%. And so then watch how it flows. So you break character, you betray yourself. When you betray yourself, you're what I call lesser than. You're lesser than the person that I should be. I know that I'm lesser than my character. And maybe it's minor and you can turn it around, or you did something stupid and fix it. But you do that enough. You betray your character enough, which can include not just, well, I don't steal things, I don't hurt people, I wasn't there fast enough, I didn't do good enough, right? That can be your character too. When you betray that character, you become lesser than. Well, just like the whole helpless, hopeless, not good enough idea, I don't like those words, right? You call me that, in a bar, we're going to have a problem. But that lesser
Going to meet
than,
the angry Viking therapist at that point, right?
That's where it comes out, right? But when I'm lesser than, and I'm not good enough, whether that's depressed or whatever people want to call it, when I'm lesser than, that's when I feel terrible. Well, there's only one option other than lesser than, and that's greater than. If I'm greater than, I'm covering up my lesser than, right? So when I'm sitting in the median, hating everybody, that's my greater than covering up my lesser than of not being good enough and breaking character and screwing up and all those things that I was feeling deep down inside. I just didn't want to deal with. So, and there's a piece to this. I'm not one that says anger is always bad. There are times fighting somebody in a ditch by myself where anger probably served me, right? And so I'll get a lot of kickback from that. Like, oh, if you can control your anger, you'll be all right. Are you though? Really?
This is one of those things where you talk a lot about healthy negative emotions.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? And anger can be one of those healthy negative emotions.
Right.
Can you, because you talk about this too, you talk about not being ruled by your emotions and healthy negative emotions. How can we, we're a range of 20s and 30s here on, I'm still in my 30s, by the way, boys. Okay. Still in my 30s.
I was going to say, I'm 30, and I'm pretty sure Josh is older than I am. So we're just 30s.
So we're in our 30s.
We're all 30s.
So we're in our 30s.
Yeah. We're all 30s.
I just turned 30, so yeah.
But how can we, is this where like stuff like rational emotive behavior therapy comes in to help walk the line between these healthy and negative emotions, or where does that come in? So you have EMDR and then you have your REBT stuff.
What is that, first of all? Because I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, that's great. So REBT is rational emotive behavior therapy. So people that have been around therapy may have heard of something CBT. It's super popular cognitive behavior therapy. It's a talk-based kind of therapy. Well, REBT was a precursor to that. And what I like to call REBT for a couple different reasons is angry person CBT, right? I actually went to the Beck Institute, who created CBT. It's one of the most popular therapy types. I learned a lot during those couple of weeks, and I agreed with a lot of what they said, but I walked away from there not feeling like it was all the missing pieces for me. And, much like Police and Fire Academy, when we come out of graduate school, you don't know how to be a therapist. When you come out of Police or Fire Academy, you don't know how to be a cop or a fireman. You got to really learn that stuff for real. You've got a base of knowledge like I did. But so I found REBT. It's grown with me over the years. It's actually, I call it my primary modality because it's what I use the most. So rational emotive behavior therapy. So a lot of the tenets of that, and talk about those healthy and unhealthy emotions. In REBT, we know that it's not an event that causes your emotion. We feel like it does because it happens very quickly. We've always been told, right? You break up with me, I'm sad. You steal from me, I'm angry. You hurt me, I'm pissed. The reality is that between the event, the thing that happened, and our consequence, our emotional or behavioral consequence at the end, is this space, this belief. And in that space is where we decide and interpret what the event meant, right? What does it mean about the world? What does it mean about me? What does it mean about other people? And it can go much, much bigger than that. That's just the premise, the idea that you have to learn to separate the fact that it's not the event that causes the emotion or the reaction. My filter, my belief system will get me to a healthy or unhealthy emotion. So we're not trying to make bad things good. We're not trying to make angry into happy. So unhealthy and healthy negative emotions. So negative is negative, but healthy negative emotions are things that I can deal with. Frustrated, annoyed, disappointed, sad, upset, remorse, disappointment. Unhealthy negative emotions is the ones that aren't going to serve me at all. In fact, they're causing problems. Sad becomes depressed. Nervous becomes anxious. Frustrated becomes anger. Remorse, which is things I wish I'd done differently, turns into guilt, which is remorse, plus I'm a horrible person. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not
Leads to
trying to
like
get from,
despair, right?
yeah, exactly. It's the bottom, right? It's the not good
Mm-hmm.
enoughs. So we're not trying to get from angry, anxious, depressed, and guilty to happy. I'm trying to get from angry to frustrated, right? And that's the healthy part of anger. And the example I
Hmm.
use is I can do things. I can make decisions when I'm frustrated. I can make decisions when I'm disappointed. I can make decisions when I'm sad or upset or remorseful. I'm not making decisions on anger, anxiety, depression, and guilt, right? Those have completely taken over. And so, again, it's not so simple as, hey, just change the way you think and everything will be okay. No, there are some bad things out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the event that happens in my life is filtered through my belief system, which I've come to in what feels like uh, a rational way over decades of doing policing and dealing with negative things. But that filter, which is usually irrational when we're at our worst, that filter is what creates our emotional response or the behavioral consequence. And we have to learn I can't change the event. I can't just change the emotion at the end. I have to debate whether my belief system is rational or not. And a lot of what we find when I'm anger, anxiety, depressed, or feeling guilty is that my belief system that I've held on to for a very long time and I think I have evidence for, it's pretty irrational, actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's full of things that are putting us at our worst at that emotion, and now we make the worst decisions, right? The kids have to listen to me. You can't treat me this way. They must not be like this. The world should be different, right? You must treat
And
me with the respect I deserve. I must do perfectly. The world must be easy and carefree and give me what I deserve, right? They're all irrational. And it's not that we can just change those sentences and the world gets better. But once I start to dig in there and realize, and REBT is a process, but once I get in there, dig in there, and start to realize how much of my filter is screwed up, for me, it felt forced to have to change this because I wanted to get
yeah.
better. But now that I'm better and I look back over those 20 years, I think, man, my filter was so screwed up, I didn't even know it.
So you triggered a couple of thoughts that connected to stuff that I read. Probably I was studying this stuff like four or 5 years ago. It was like flow and flow states, of which frustration is a flow trigger.
Yeah.
Like being in that frustrated state. Now there's certain kinds of frustration, like, oh, I just can't figure this out, and man, like I think of Tom Cruise with his bat in A Few Good Men. Like he's frustrated, he gets
Oh,
his
yeah.
bat and he gets in his flow state.
Yep.
Which is a little bit different from I'm so frustrated I can't think straight.
Yep.
Right. So frustrated is a good thing, right? So frustrated is like you're in the right place.
Yep.
Almost, right?
Yep. I would argue all those healthy emotions I can make good decisions on. Frustrated, sad, disappointed, annoyed, upset.
You could almost say it's where genius is born. Is that a frustration?
Especially for, you know, what most of us refer to as type A personality, right? Like I need
Mm-hmm.
some motivation to get stuff done, right? I need some motivation to make a good decision, make change. So I don't see those while they're still negative, right? Disappointed, frustrated, sad, upset, annoyed. That's still negative. I'd love to just be happy or clueless or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that's like, but I'm not. you know. My wife is the one that, you know, that sees it a little differently. My wife is the one that if somebody pulls out in front of us, you know, she thinks like, oh gosh, I hope they don't have a family member in the hospital, or they got a crock pot they're not trying to spill. Then I'm trying to go to the other extreme, right? What a stupid piece of crap this person is, you know?
Gonna end up in a hospital bed with them. If
Right,
that's the
exactly. Yeah,
case.
that's where I'm at, right? And admittedly, traffic is one I still work on a regular basis, you know, uh, but I thought that I was making good decisions being in that place of anger, and I wasn't. I was destroying everything. I was pushing everything away. Um, you know, and not only, you know, it's a cool segue too. You know, you talked about that it's not just at work; it's in other places too. I tell you, a
Hmm.
time that I really started to see this. So I'm very fortunate. I get to travel all over the U.S., speak to different agencies, public safety agencies, counseling agencies. I just got back yesterday from somewhere, just flew in. But so my wife usually doesn't get to go, you know, because they just pay for me usually. Well, I had picked up a contract at a local EMS symposium, rural EMS symposium, where all those smaller agencies kind of get together. And it's just a drive. So drive down there. So she went with me. She was going to see my speech that I usually give. And about halfway there, I either get this like really cool or really stupid idea. And I said, you know, rural EMS sometimes is a lot of family. You know, dad and son are firemen, wife's a medic, he's a fireman. You know, there's a lot of interconnection in that rural side. Would you like to say something about what it was like living with me in what I call those dark years? So she says, yeah, I'll put something together. So, you know, I'm doing my speech. I'm in speaker mode. I'm flowing through this thing I've done 1,000 times. I ask her to come up and talk. And I hear her, she's talking about, you know, that her and the kids used to walk around on eggshells, and that vacations would be ruined 5 minutes into it because of her husband's anger and just irritability and pissed off at everybody. And, you know, and she said, you know, my husband has never laid a hand on me or the kids, but you know, I walked around on eggshells and we were nervous all the time what was going to set dad off next. And I'm in kind of speaker mode, right? So I'm listening to her, and my first thought is like, dang, you're hot. What'd you stay with that moron for? Like, why would you stay with an idiot like that? You know? And she got done, and I thanked her, and I turned back around to go to my slides to see where I was, and it hit me. Oh, cool. That was me. I was that guy, right?
You made a video to that talked about that, and that's what hooked me
Mm,
on the angry Viking therapist. And I actually we chatted a little bit on Instagram after that. And I was
yeah.
like, man, you were singing my song with, you know, dad, kids are walking on eggshells, everybody's walking on eggshells. Like, hey, look, hey, can't be loud in the house because you don't want to make dad angry, or something like that. That was huge. That's what hooked me. I'm glad you kind of told that story.
Yeah. Yep.
It in REBT, back to that topic, you talked about there's a space, and in that space is basically your belief system,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yep.
And so I couldn't help myself, but I have to do this, and the guys are going to roll their eyes. I already know it, but it's like enter Stoicism,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah. As a matter of
As
fact,
a
if you listen to Dr. Albert Ellis, he passed away in the mid 2000s or late 2000s, but he studied under Freud, which is the psychoanalysis, whatever he
Mhm.
thinks, lay on the couch, free think, talk for a year, and then they'll tell you why your mom hated you, or, you know, whatever they come up with. Well, he studied under Freud back in the 40s and 50s. And he says, you know, the problem was that Freud has a gene for inefficiency, and Dr. Ellis, he said, I have a gene for efficiency. I want to make some change here. So, in his words, he says, I went back to my childhood love of Stoic philosophy and started create REBT. So, that's really how I first connected with REBT. First was during my doctorate program, we had to take a class, and it was something to the title of like philosophy of leadership, something like that. And we had to read like 6 philosophy books really quickly. It was very overwhelming. But the one that really struck with me, I think it was an Epictetus book, and it was Stoic philosophy. And then at the end of this class, the only grade in this class was the final paper, where they give you this scenario, and you have to kind of use philosophy to solve it, or what would you do? And so that got me to reading about Stoic philosophy. And then here comes REBT while I'm looking for a psychology theory. And man, it just fit me so well. And it's exactly that the Stoic idea is not to have no emotion. It's to have, in a different term than they would say it, to have rational emotion. right? What's
Yeah.
rational here? What's based on evidence? And we all work in a world of evidence, right? Whether I'm going to court, you guys are taking a call. Like, of course, every call is different, but I don't go to court after an arrest with, I'm pretty sure that guy did it, right? I'm going to court with, I know he did it. Here's how I know he did it, right? You guys make decisions in your world. Like, granted, every call is different, every patient's different, but you're making those decisions of what to do based on evidence. You're not making it up or just randomly picking a drug or randomly running into a house. So
I'd like to think so anyway.
well, and I'm sure that some do, but but it's mostly based on evidence. But we won't do that for ourselves, right? We won't have our emotional outcome be based on evidence, and I don't want it to be no emotion, and I don't want it to be fake emotion. I just want it to be rational emotion, right?
Yeah, Tim Grover. I'm gonna steal it from his book. I think it was winning, right? It's not being emotionless, but it's using emotion less,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yep.
So, and again, I've recently started getting into Stoicism. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, hey, I'm gonna start posting about it, man, because I'm an expert. No, I'm not. I'm no Ryan Holiday by any stretch of the imagination. But I feel like in the space that we're talking about, and in the kind of work that we do, that Stoicism is kind of like a pathway to resilience,
Yeah.
which I believe is where I think it's a big hole in our game in the emergency services world. Of we don't have great pathways for resilience, and we say things like Stoicism and people dismiss it because, oh, I don't want to be some emotionless robot. It's like, no. It's what you're talking about. It's using the evidence that you have and giving it a critical appraisal and then making a decision based on that, based on what you know, not what you feel.
Yep.
Correct?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we challenge in REBT. And again, EMDR is amazing. Some therapists will hate that I say this, and that's okay. I think EMDR gets massively overused sometimes. It's not a fix-all. It's good for what it's for. It's good for the things that we can prove that it does. Some people use it a little too much, and that's okay. If it works for them, it's fine. But REBT is what changed my life. EMDR helped me with the overreactions that I was having that were based on some of those feelings. The neurobiology of the side, I like to say, the part where I felt like I couldn't control it at all. REBT is what helped me change the way that I think. Not fake happy, not fake positive, just rationally. And even now I find myself, something will happen and I'll be kind of proud that I was frustrated or disappointed or annoyed, whereas 10 years ago I would have been angry and pissed and yelling at somebody. And even now, the example I like to give that's kind of real life is I'm at our local grocery store, and the grocery store that's near me is the second busiest in the state, and there's one checker open. Right? Like, we're already frustrated. So there's like 20 people in line. I kind of need the stuff that I'm buying. So I'm in line, and Dr. Trevor knew me, right? I have these desires I wish weren't happening. I wish it wasn't like this. I don't think this is a good way to do business. I'm frustrated. I don't want to be treated this way. I don't want to have to stand in this line. But because I have these rational desires about the thing that's going on, I'm really frustrated. I'm not fake happy, right? Again, my wife is the one that can say, "Oh, I'm just happy we have the money to buy groceries and there's a roof over our head." That's not me. I'm rationally frustrated though. But because I'm rationally frustrated, I've got that healthy negative emotion. I can make a decision here. I can stay. I can go. I can steal the whole cart. I can call corporate. I can yell. I got decisions. I got options. Two people in front of me is a lady losing her mind. Now, granted, this is old me, but there's a lady losing her mind. And she has these absolutistic, irrational demands, is her filter. It should not be like this. It must not be this way. I will not be treated with disrespect like this. You can't run a business this way. You can't do this to me, right? She has all these irrational demands that have forced her into the only option being anger. And guess what her option is? I just gave it away. Anger, right? She has no other option than to just be angry. And I'm not trying to go from angry to, oh, isn't it just nice we have money for groceries? If you can do that, good. That's not me, right? I'm just trying to get from there to frustrated. So when I get through this line, not only did I not embarrass myself, but I actually feel kind of proud of myself, right? Like, wow, that sucked, but it went okay, you know?
Kind of like erasing some of that shame part,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Because ruining vacations and the kids walking around on eggshells is a heck of a lot worse than being mad about being stuck in line, right? But at some place that I don't want to be. But it took steps like that to get to the bigger steps to where now I don't have those reactions as much anymore. I'm not going to say I'm perfect. I never say that. But I don't have those same reactions anymore because I'm no longer stuck with this completely broken filter that I thought was based on evidence. You can't do this to me. It should not be this way. You should, shall, must not, cannot, shall, have to, right? They're not real.
Mm-hmm.
They're not real. And once you start to see that, not just by changing a word in your sentence, it's just an easy example. But when you start to see that my filter's broken, my filter's irrational, and I came to it fairly, the things we were seeing and doing and feeling. But once I figured out that was broken, life-changing, absolutely life-changing.
Wow. I have to write some of this down.
If it makes you feel
Cody,
better,
did you have some? I mean, not Cody, Josh, did you have something to say?
So, Doc, you've got a whole slew of videos out there that people want to know, kind of not just what you're about, but kind of what's out there as far as mindsets for folks. And some of these I've carried for a little while. One of my favorites that you did, or I guess I don't want to call them prompts, but that's what they turned into for me, was what you believe about the event is what drives your response.
Yeah.
So belief comes before the space, correct?
The belief is the space. That's all you've got there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, think of it, and here's the easiest way to think of it, because we love our acronyms in public safety and military, right? ABC. A is the activating event. It's the thing that happens. You can't control it. If you can control it, you just go change it, right? A is the activating event. C, let's skip one. C is the consequence, the emotional behavioral consequence. Your emotion, what you did about it, how you reacted. You can't just change that one either, or why are we having this conversation? Just go change it, right? Just go be sad then, if you can do that. Change your reaction. B in the middle is my basic belief system, right? That is the filter. And I think it's Viktor Frankl who used an idea even before REBT in logotherapy is there's a stimulus and a response. Between that stimulus and the response is a space. And in that space is you decide what the stimulus means, right? Not was it good, was it bad, but what do you believe about what just happened? And never do again, never do I want to change it to something fake positive or something you don't truly believe. I'm not trying to go from bad to good. I'm just trying to go from horrible to is it, right? Is it rationally horrible? What we call awfulizing. This is the most awful thing that could possibly happen. I can't possibly stand it. You label yourself something, and you have this irrational demand about the way that it should be, right? And it's not about getting stepped on. I don't want my people to be stepped on. I still want them to be strong. But I even look at this and how much this would have helped me on a roadside traffic stop where somebody was losing their cool. We've all been to those calls or made those stops, or where sometimes you're the guy that's losing it on the person, and sometimes you're the one that's pulling back the guy from losing it, right? We all have those stories. But how many times, not only did I maybe unprofessionally or at least inappropriately lose my cool, and I don't want to be stepped on. I don't want people stepped on, but I went so far with that anger and that demand for respect, which anybody on this planet by this point should know you can't demand respect, but they try it anyway, right?
It's the fastest way to lose it, right?
Oh my gosh, that demand, it's irrational. There is no evidence or every basis that you can demand respect. I want respect.
That was another one of your prompts.
Yeah.
Was, are your demands just irrational bullshit?
I guarantee you that 99.9% of them are, and I only say 99 because I don't want to be wrong. It's probably 100, right? But your demand for respect is not rational. It's not real. It's not a real thing. Anybody that's done these jobs knows that. Now, my desire to be respected, that I have. And if you disrespect me, we're probably going to do something about it, right? But there's a big difference between my consequence for my desire of respect from being frustrated and we're going to handle this my way, right? Or the consequence of anger because my belief system is you absolutely must treat me with the respect I deserve or you're a piece of crap.
Yeah, it's like if you got your respect at the cost of your connection with XYZ person, it's not worth it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but
I almost think of this. Sorry, I don't mean to. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Wilkins.
no,
Go ahead.
Good. Go ahead.
This is. I don't know if this is a false connection or not, but the first thing that popped in my head when you guys were talking about folks that are demanding respect, oftentimes don't get it, is because, and this is my personal experience. A lot of folks that demand to be called Dr. something are the ones that end up not getting that respect.
Sure.
Because the folks that, how before we start recording, Dr. Wilkins, we asked you, what can we call you? And you're like, basically, I don't care. Call me XYZ, right? I have found 100% of the time, or maybe I should say 99%, like you said, the folks that say, call me Dr. X, and they're like very douchey about it, are the same folks that, for one reason or another, end up not living up to that respect. Whereas the folks that are the true people that I look up to, one of the reasons I think I look up to them is because they're such badasses and they don't even act like it.
Yeah.
So I just connected to that. The other thing I will say though is, again, in my journey in mental health, I used to feel annoyed by those folks. And I think I still do a little bit, to be completely honest with you. I just can't really stand them. But I have gained a huge amount of compassion for them. Because I don't know, to me, there must be some inner pain. There must be some inner trauma that's leading them to have to outwardly demand that respect. I don't think I have much else to say on that. Just the fact, just that observation as you guys were talking.
Well, how easy is it if you're treating me poorly, right? I want respect. I can't demand it, but in the moment it goes to demand, right? But how easy is it to get to that negative and, like you said, seeing them, trying to understand that they're going through something, which isn't always easy. I'm still not great at that, but when I see other people as not people anymore, I'm not necessarily degrading them. We've all spent time. We know that there's certain folks in society that we naturally look down upon because we've been to a call or we've seen them do something or we're tired of their, a little negative. But when I start seeing people as objects, which is easy to do, and I'm careful with that word because I don't want people thinking that I want to see everybody as nice and happy and I don't know what their pain is. That's all true, right? But I'm not trying to go that far. But when I see them as objects that are in my way or are there to get me where I'm going, right? I'm just using them to get where I'm going, or like I said, objects, then how easy is it for me to vilify them? Right. And so by the same token, these people that are like, you must call me Dr. So-and-so, I earned it. You must call me captain because I've earned it. You must call me that, in society or public safety. I would rather you show me how good you are at what you do and make me wonder, like, I feel like that guy's knowledgeable. I wonder what his credentials are, and I'm with you. There are certain like academic places or things that you do where you have to use formal titles, of course, but other than that, I'm just Trevor. you know, and because I've seen too much of that, like you said, one way I learned this was we had an earlier discussion about the University of Badassery and Pat McNamara. Pat McNamara is a Green Beret for over 2 decades. He's got amazing stories. I've been honored to hear some of them. And he's a cool guy. He tracks a lot of like-minded guys. You know, he's got a big coaching program out there. He's got cool social media.
Basic dude stuff.
It's basic dude stuff, right? That's his big thing. Stuff. But I bet, with rare exception about maybe telling, you know, a podcast or something where it's appropriate, you do not hear that guy talk about his Green Beret experiences. And trust me, he's got them. I've heard the stories. I've been in that man's house. I've hung out with those guys. They're cool people. They are as they present themselves. But he doesn't sit around and talk about a lot. And I don't want to mix up his words, but I think he says something effective like, I don't rest on my laurels, right? Like, I'm proud of what I did. Mm-hmm. That's cool. But I want you to see what I'm doing now. And yes, it was predicated by the things that I've done and the things that I've learned. But if all I can do is tell you a story from 20 years ago and that's it, you know, how many people have we seen in public safety or medicine or, you know, politics, once they lose that title and they go downhill quickly in life, right? You know, how many times we see a retiree and 3 months later they're a mess because not because they only had the title. Maybe they got kids at home, but they realized they lost that thing that they felt like made them who they were. It's a slippery slope after that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that speaks to the kind of the environment that you operated in, like in Pat McNamara's case, he was coming from the tippity top, right? The top mm-hmm. tier folks where you earned your spot every day. And so you kind of get it beat out of you almost that, yeah, okay, I am this guy. Well, today we'll see you tomorrow though.
Yeah.
And man, can you imagine our organizations, you know, Moose and Josh and even you, Trevor, you know, back in the trooper days of, you know, can you imagine if you had to earn your job every single day? There was no HR processes where it was like 7 write-ups and you finally got your final and then you could dispute it and maybe keep your job. Right, you know, right. Can you imagine an environment like that and just how the stress of being having to be on your game like that, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that in an environment like that, and I am totally riffing on this, so you guys can shoot me in the face here in a minute if you want to, but do you think an environment like that might be a piece of an antidote to burnout? Because there's meaningful struggle, it's meaningful frustration, and it's meaningful, I've got to be on my game today, versus the kind of burnout that we usually talk about of it's death by 1,000 cuts, yeah. And I'm wrapped up in my emotions of things. And what do you guys think?
So I think you're onto something. And I would argue that depending on where you work, you do earn your job essentially, or earn your worth in your job every day. So, mm-hmm. You know, the station I work at, we're busy. Everyone knows that in my department, we're constantly going out the door. A place that you think people would just be like, you know what, get me out of here. Let me do my time. But everyone that shows up wants to be there. No, there's very rarely do we have an involuntary transfer to our station and then in general my shift. And every day you have to kind of prove that you are who you are and that you're going to do a good job, because we're surrounded by people that want to be there, that want to do the job, that want to train, want to provide care, want to run the calls every day. And when someone start to like not pull their weight and not show up to be doing the job correctly, it shows. And then everyone starts noticing it. And either we come together to fix it, which is most of the time, or sometimes there's nothing fixing it. And then that's it. They kind of ebb away and that's it. Luckily, I haven't seen that in the 5 years I've been on the shift, but it can happen. So there are those places where, you know, I think it might have been said earlier, but maybe it wasn't. Iron sharpens iron. Mm-hmm. Like the people that want to be there and want to do the job are going to make sure that everyone else is going to be doing their job too, making you earn your job every day.
I absolutely love that. Sorry, go ahead, Josh. I cut you off. I apologize.
Yeah, just right at the end, you know, like I would expect that if I started slacking, someone would be like, Josh, what's going on? Like, this is not you. You are angry about EMS calls. That's not me. Or you're just angry about calls in general. You just are off your game. And it's happened on individual days. And it's just, what's up? You know, what's going on? Let's talk about it. You know, and it's definitely, you can see the difference between that and a shift or a station that doesn't have that same mentality.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like when you get detailed around or you end up working at different stations with different partners and the people that don't share that mentality, it's a different day at work. It's a different shift. It's a different, it's like a different department. Like people always love to say that within fire departments, there's, you know, let's say my department has 3 shifts. So there's 3 different fire departments there, 5 battalions, 5 different fire departments there. And then you go to each firehouse, same thing. Completely different mentalities. And it's crazy. The busy stations, for the most part, have this earn your job every day, iron sharpens iron, and we love to be there.
You're like, finish up.
It's like the premier stations and shifts. Even though we're busy as hell, and you're not sleeping at night, you're not getting rest during the day, you're training, you're running calls. It's where you want to be. It's the best places to be.
They tell you when you walk through the door, like, yo, you're going to work while you're here. You're going to work. And it's those kinds of teams where it all revolves around that word mediocrity. And you're either on the kind of team where you're fighting. They operate at such a level of motivation or skill or whatever it is, where you're fighting just to be mediocre in that environment and not lose your spot. Or you're on a team where they are fighting to protect their mediocrity.
Yep.
Right. Just on the complete opposite end of that spectrum. And like, those are the teams where you just start rapping the wire, you kill yourself. Right. When you walk through the door. Moose, what were you going to say, man?
Right. You look at the like, how does that happen? A big piece of that is the people that you're around. I remember it was about 2005. We'd got a new chief at the department I was working for. At the city, and he came in and he hated our BDU type uniform that night shift got to wear. And to be fair, like, you know, we typically ruin things for ourselves in public safety, right? So we had let them get to looking crappy and would wear them kind of without the shirt underneath, and, you know, taking little liberties. Well, he put us in dress uniform, and our day shift uniform was a dress uniform. It looked good, but it was a dress uniform. And I remember leaving
like the tie and everything, right?
Brass buttons every day. And I remember leaving roll call and that day, and I was pretty frustrated, you know, like, we're going to dress uniform starting Monday, but I'm frustrated. Like, what can I do about it? I'm just a new guy, you know, I've been here a couple of years. I met up with my beat partner at the time, and he was livid. And his rhetoric was very different than frustrated. You know, his rhetoric was, I can't believe they forgot where they came from. I hate this place. We should all leave. We had this thing called the Triangle of Death, which is where you could see the white shirt, you know, instead of wearing a black shirt with dress uniform white. People are going to get hurt because of the Triangle of Death, and you're going to see our brass sneaking up on them, and people aren't going to want to be the police because they don't want to rip their, you know, nice uniform, and I hate this place, and they forgot where they came from. And 5 minutes of that, and I'm sitting next to him in the cruiser going, yeah, man, forget this place. I'm out of here. They forgot where they came from, right? And there's a big, when I look back on that now, of course, it was, you know, who you're around, like you said, with the busy shift and the busy station. Every department has that, right? The guys that really want to work. And I was always more attracted to that kind of work and people. And but look at the difference. I had a frustration, right? I had a desire that we not go to the stupid dress uniform. And I don't really think it's fair, but I guess we could start a petition, or maybe, I don't know, maybe something will happen. My beat partner had a demand that it absolutely shall not be like this, and he's treating us with disrespect, and they forgot where they came from, and they can't do this to us. And he was living.
Is that where your perspective of what if you're becoming the weakest link comes from?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
to some
because
degree?
I absolutely, the way that when I go talk places, I always start out with, you know, here's who I am, here's what I do. I'm going to tell you later why I like to work with public safety. And then I tell a story. And the story is about what I say is a client that I have permission to tell a story about. And it's a state cop that went to this wreck and this, this horrible thing. And I tell this story. And I do that because, one, it connects with the audience, of course, but two, everybody's got their worst story. Everybody can hear that story and go, oh man, I can see me standing there at that one. Well, and what I really talk about is the next 7 years of that client's life, right? How things started to fall apart and alcohol increased and pushing family away and the things that I call the real signs of PTSD, right? Nobody really comes into my office and says, I've witnessed a horrible event. I'm having reminders about the event. I'm avoiding the reminders. It's changed the cognition I have on life, right? That's WebMD stuff. So people come in and it's substance abuse and alcohol and anger and they're sick all the time now. And they're, all the things that are going on. Well, anyway, so I tell that whole story and I tell them, I just want you to see, I want the focus to be on what it looks like, as you kind of go downhill, because this client went from multiple, awards for bravery in the line of duty, the guy that Sarge could always call, the most felony arrests in a post area award, most citations in an area award, to the absolute worst employee you could possibly have working for you in a manner of 7 years. And then at the end, I reveal, by the way, that story's me, right? I was the poster child cop. I loved working. I loved taking bad guys to jail. I stayed out all night doing it, no matter what the cost. I didn't care what my pay was. I had multiple bravery awards, multiple awards for felony arrests. And then I became the worst employee you could have working for you over a period of the next 7 years. And I can see it now. But at the time, I was just angry and everybody else was a piece of crap. But so that's what I do to connect that, because that's that burnout, right? And I have lots of thoughts about burnout, but that's a big area of it right there, is the people you have around you. Not fake motivation, right? Everybody has crappy days. But if everybody else has these irrational demands about the way it should go, guess what you're doing in the next 6 months? You'll be in the same place. I tell guys all the time who come in and they're like on the verge of divorce. And I'm not a big marriage counselor. I that's not my strong area. I employ somebody who's a marriage counselor. And they're like, Doc, I think I'm going to get divorced. The first thing I ask them is, what is the relationship status of the 3 people at your station? Oh, they're all divorced and they hate their ex-wife and they bitch about her all the time. And I just flat tell them, like, you're getting divorced, dude. Like, and maybe they need to, right? Maybe it's a couple that shouldn't be together. But I always tell them is, why don't you see if you can transfer to a station with 4 guys that are married that have been through some stuff with their family? And I'm not saying that'll save it. I'm not saying definitely don't get divorced. I don't know your story. But if you're in the station with 3 other dudes that are divorced and they hate their ex-wife every day, you're getting divorced, dude. Like, it's the same thing. It's the same mentality.
100%. 100%. Can you imagine? Go ahead, Josh.
It's crazy you bring up that portion. So another unique feature about my shift, I'm trying to think right now, and if one of my coworkers hears this and I'm wrong, tell me. I'm pretty sure there's not a single person in my shift that actually has been divorced. I had a captain, he's retired, that was divorced a couple times, but everyone else has been in long-term relationships, has kids, been married for many years, and there so rarely is there anything even close to anger about a spouse at work spoken
it's resiliency
about. And so like that's just something that we never talk, that never comes up. And like, obviously the shift is always fluid because people can come and go, but I've heard the opposite though. Like, that station over there, man, that shift, it's full of guys getting divorced and people with 2 ex-wives or something, or they're working on their second wife right now. And the mentality from those shifts I've always heard is, man, God help you if you get detailed there, or if you get involuntary transfer to that shift. Like, it's tough to work in those places.
What you guys are reminding me all of, man, this is I have so many points here, and I wrote some stuff down because I didn't want to forget. Josh, when you were talking about your team, you have a solid shift, right? And I couldn't help, the first thought that came to my head is, and I can't remember which chapter it's in, but in Jocko's Extreme Ownership, he talks about there's a portion of SEAL training where you have, I guess, boat teams, right? And you have teams that are well functioning and you have teams that are not well functioning.
No bad teams, just bad leaders, right?
Yeah, and what they did was they for folks that haven't read the book, I would recommend you heavily, seriously read the book. My wife is reading it right now. They switched the leaders to see what happened, and what they saw was the results flipped. Where the bad leader was, that team started to slip, and where the good leader went, right, they started to perform better. So a portion of that has to be the head of the team, right? And I imagine you have a good culture wherever you're at in terms of that. The thing that I thought of though is, and this is coming from my own again from my own journey. Well, I'm not saying that I work in a bad place. I'm just saying my personal experiences. Sometimes you're not. You don't. Well, I guarantee you, someone from work's going to hear this. But sometimes you don't have the luxury of that environment already being there for you. And for me, one of the things that I try to be thankful every morning when I go to work. I get in my car and I say a little prayer, and I just it's just me having a conversation, and I thank God for giving me the opportunity to impact patients at the level that I'm able to impact. And it's a series of things that I say, but that is a result of me. And I'm not perfect at all. I have a lot of work to do, but creating that iron sharpens iron environment in my own head, because then I feel I can enter an environment that may be toxic and be the change I want to see, if that makes sense. And
Sure.
I just wanted to, I think about our own team, right? I mean, Josh, you said, no one's divorced or whatever, and you might be wrong, but they'll tell you if you are. But, I think of the 4 guys or the 5 guys, and, my wife's on the team now too. We bring similar values and circumstances to the team. What advice would you guys give to folks that aren't in those good situations, and how can they cultivate, that sharp mindset so that they can be resilient to those toxic work environments? What would you say, Dr. Wilkins, to yourself from however many years ago? Hey, you can get into that squad car, and when that guy's negative, you can be the positive instead of in that sense, being not the chameleon. That's not a good word, but taking on the energy from your partner or your supervisor.
No, it's great because I see it all the time. And when I have these talks, whether it be about leadership or mental health specifically, which I think involves leadership, I'll hear that a lot is like, yeah, but my supervisor is terrible. That's great that you guys have a good group, but my supervisor is terrible. Well, the easy answer, the first answer, which is true, and it'll kind of lead in the second. The first answer is, well, then you're the leader now, right? You may not be in charge of the truck or whatever, but you're the only one that can lead that. And again, I don't want my people to be stepped on, right? I don't want we're not turning you into nice little rosy people who get stepped on, right? But you said something earlier about what if the other person has something going on? Well, first of all, I guarantee you they do. It probably shouldn't be an excuse for the way that they act. But if I've learned anything from sitting in this chair, it's that people are going through some stuff. I've had people come into my office, whether it be like my office or online, and people that I've looked up to for decades, the badasses, and they tell me what's going on in their life. And I'm like, how are you possibly working right now? So again, it doesn't mean give everybody every benefit of the doubt and get stepped on. But I said a little bit about this earlier. The second part of that is when you stop seeing people as vehicles or objects, things to get you, to where you need to go, or things that are in your way, then your outlook on what that person is talking about may be different. Now, maybe they're a horrible person and they'll never change, and you got to change shifts. I don't know, right? But when I stopped seeing people as, objects, really, whether there was a means to get me somewhere or something in my way, then because I talk to people all day long and I hear what they're going through, a lot of their reactions started to make sense to me. Not an excuse, not okay, we need to change, right? I've got this quick story that I look back on, and we used to have a NASCAR race here in Kentucky for a couple of years, and it was always a horrible assignment, especially when you didn't have seniority. You're standing like for 18 hours on the asphalt directing traffic. It's terrible. But I'd got enough seniority where now I'm just in an intersection in my car, supposed to be watching traffic, probably watching a movie, to be honest. But, I've gotten to this place in seniority where I got the good assignment now. And just down the road from me, there's a gas station and a fight call goes out. Well, traffic's flowing pretty good. I'm like, I'm going to go down there and handle this real quick. And me and a trooper pull up at the same time. And it's two ticket scalpers, arguing over a corner. So we split them up. And I'm telling my guy, like, listen, dude, there's no jail in this county. You got to be transported a county away. None of us from the state police live in this area. We'll have to come back for court. It's not going to be good for you. I don't know how bond works around here. Why don't you just find a different corner, dude? Because selling tickets is illegal anyway. And he's like, I got you. I respect. I'm like, yep, you're right. And I'm not saying that I was always that way, but my story. And he's like, all right, yeah, you're right. That good level head. I'm going to find another place to be. Right. From behind me, I hear the words, don't you ever disrespect the badge of a Kentucky State Trooper. And I thought, oh, here we go. So I turn around and again, I've been this guy, but on the officer side and, he's nose to nose with this guy and they're losing it and it gets resolved. Everybody calms down. We send them on their way. But I remember thinking, years later, like, man, what an idiot that cop was, like, what do you, at the time, I'm like, yeah, don't you dare disrespect us. We've earned our spot. You can't talk to us this way. Right. But all these years later, I remember thinking like, man, that guy lost his cool. And again, I've been that guy too, but in this story, why did he do that? I had a desire to be respected. He had an absolutistic demand that he must be treated with respect he deserves or you're a worthless piece of crap human, and he turned him into an object, right? Now, again, for the cops listening and for public safety listening, sometimes, yes, you have to tell people to shut up and sit down or push them down or force them into handcuffs. We're not saying you can desire your way into every situation, right? But that one right there is a perfect example of the thousands of times that I've done it where what was the outcome? They both left pissed off. One of them got a complaint on the other one, everybody's heated because by making that demand of respect, I've turned that person into an object. Right? And like I said, there's a million videos out there, of cops losing it. And in my head, I'm like, oh, the guy deserved that. He deserved that one. Wish I could do that. When in the reality is, I've turned that person into an object, which is exactly what we do in all those situations, whether it comes to the burnout conversation earlier or the one you just had. If you have no leader and your shift isn't like that, as romantic as this sounds, you're the guy then. It's you. I had to do it. I had to become the guy to fix me.
I'll take two arms to this one. On the one arm, Chris Cebollero, of some EMS leadership notoriety, and he's kind of a name out there in the space a little bit, as far as developing EMS leaders, put out a video years ago, and it floored me. He said, it doesn't matter how bad you think your company is, how bad your boss is, how bad your partner is. It does not get you off the hook for being a good teammate or a good employee. None of that gets you off the hook for being a good teammate or a good employee. And, hearing your story, Doc, I'm going to take that to the other arm and go a step further. Is it doesn't necessarily matter the circumstances of the situation that you find yourself in. The other person could absolutely be losing their minds. There could be a totally chaotic scene. Somebody's dead, dying in front of you. Your partner sucks at what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. Let's insert a bunch of, lenses and context into this to try to color it the way that we want to. However, none of that context or none of those lenses gets you off the hook for being the one is just the right word I'm looking for. Good and just. It doesn't get you off the hook for, now, to your point, yeah, sometimes being just is sit down, knock it off. Sometimes it's maybe being a little bit aggressive, and that's the right thing to do in that situation. It's still just because it's coming from a good place. So no matter the circumstances you find yourself in, being good and just is the baseline expectation. Or right?
I guarantee, again, there's sometimes you have to do the job and you have to put somebody down or whatever you do. But I look back on those years and how many of those where I walked away thinking, well, that didn't go well. Like, that was a shit show. How many of them did I cause? Because not because it was needed. If it's needed, it's needed, right? You're not gonna change from refusing to do a pit maneuver on a car that's running just because you're thinking about who the other person is. That's not what we're saying, right? We're talking about the response that you have, right? You're still going to felony traffic stop them in a loud voice, and maybe some curse words. But the reality is, how many of those did I cause to be worse, right? How many of those did my irrational demand, which was my filter at B in the middle of the event, after the event, before the consequence, how many of those did I make 10 times worse? 99% of them, if I'm being honest.
Again, maybe there's been a ton of times where I'm taking what you're saying and applying it to myself, and maybe that's not the best thing for this episode, but you're giving me so many epiphanies here, man. This concept of turning people into objects and that being a vehicle to, the irrational demands, right? And I promise not, Josh, Cody, I'm not going to be that guy that brings up jujitsu every single time we talk now. I promise I'm not going to be that guy. But I've always wondered why it helps so many people, right? Like why it helped me. And it's because in those situations, you physically can't, if someone's better than you, and everyone's better than you when you first start, you literally cannot turn that person into an object because it doesn't work. They're going to roll over you. You are forced to consider that person as a person in front of you. And not only that, I mean, there's plenty of other things, like when you're exhausted after, there's so many, to me, endorphins and stuff running around. But simply in the analogy and the space that you've created, Dr. Wilkins, it helps me connect why the tangible good occurs. And again, it's just, it's not a question. It's just another enlightening moment for me tonight.
Cool. Yeah. Well, and it's enlightening to me. I'm not 100% where I should be, right? I'm still learning every day. But whether about how I'm doing treatment, whether it be about my own life, whether it be, I'm still learning every day. But when I figured out that my filter is the problem, and 20 years ago, I wouldn't have liked that sentence. My filter's real because people are terrible and there's bad guys out there and they're trying to hurt you. And, I see bad things. You're correct, right? You do see bad things. There are people trying to hurt you. Act accordingly. Yeah. But
to some degree, that's rational,
there's
right?
absolutely some rationality in there, right? I still carry a firearm. I'm still trained in it. I still, I'm still a lifter. I still try to stay strong to protect my family. I still make decisions when I drive and where I sit and things that I do and places that I go, based on that rationality. But is it rational that I can make any of those demands, right, that have become my broken filter, right? And what I love, I hate that people have to go through it first, but what I love is, even if it's one session, right? What I love is seeing people kind of get that realization that I'm part of the problem, right? My filter's part of the problem. And, oh, crap, I've screwed up everything because of this, right? I'm screwing up my marriage. I'm screwing up my work. I'm screwing up, like it's a slap in the face for me to look back and go, God, I was horrible. I was not a good person. I thought I was great.
I had that. Nope. I had that moment. I was reading Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Yeah. And he talks about how we're saying the word lens, and what we're actually doing is we're overlaying our moral code on top of someone who have no idea what your moral code is. You're just assuming they do because you assume you're a good human and that it's the right thing to do and the right way to believe and think about things. And then you overlay that and you start judging people based on your moral code and your moral values and fabric and network. And they have no idea what that is. So you're like, I'll use the word hate. I hate this person, or I don't like this person, or whatever, what have you. And Moose, this is funny because we were just talking about this before Doc came on, and I don't want to use the word hypocritical, but I'm overlaying my thoughts and my values on top of people who have no idea what they are, may not even subscribe to the same set of values. And I mean, if you want to talk about a situation that's ripe for interpersonal and moral conflict, I mean, that's it, right?
Yeah.
And that's why social media really fucks
Yeah.
you up. Because
It sucks.
you are, what you just described is a micro environment, micro interaction between two human beings, you and somebody else. Now you're on a platform that has been manufactured, engineered to keep your attention and be toxic as hell. And now you are laying your moral compass on a myriad of people that you may not even know that might be in it. And yeah, man, that's great
Yep.
points. Great points.
Yep. It's my filter. And my filter's mine, by the way. It's not your filter. And like you said, when I use my filter to judge you, I'm in trouble.
Right. What do you think? So then what's the right answer? I mean, because you can't look inside someone and see the moral code they have, or is it just naturally assume what they're that they're well intended?
I want to say something first. And I don't mean to cut you off, Dr. Wilkins, but this has helped me a ton. I took a history of Islam class in college, and I still have the textbook somewhere. And it was written it was written relatively recently. And there's obviously Islamophobia, right? There's obviously all these things associated with Islamic religion, especially in the United States. A lot of biases, a lot of incorrect information, and the way the author said in the preface, he said, "Listen, no matter what your background is, no matter what you're doing, no matter the reason you're opening up this textbook." He described a process called empathetic understanding. And what he meant by that was this, and what he talks about is this. He said, in your head, take all of your ideas, all of your preconceptions, and in this example is the religion of Islam. Take all of that and make the conscious decision to visualize yourself putting it in a box and closing the box. And with that, walk into whatever space you need to be mentally, and then try to take in this information. And it's not going to be easy. Those preconceptions are going to come up, but every time it comes up, tell yourself it's okay. You're human. It's natural. Put it in the box and then come back. And then when you're done, and, limit how, because it's natural that you're going to, as you get fatigued, those thoughts are going to keep coming back. When you learn that you're seeing that, say, okay, I'm going to take a step back and open the box up and, process what you got to process. But then when you come back, follow the same process. So I think that's the answer. That's what's helped me a ton. In a lot of situations, it's helped me a lot in the current events that are going on in the world today.
Well, and to answer your question about you guys, how do we do that? I realize that there's times in our jobs that we can't. Sometimes you just have to chase the car, or you just have to grab that guy and put him down. And, sometimes you just have to push somebody out of your way to get to something important, right? Like there is going to be times where we can't stop and have a discussion. But my answer for how do you find out, where their compass is and why they're doing this, ask them. Like I was thinking just this week, like in the business world, one of the things that they'll teach you in leadership is ask the other person, what's difficult about your role right now, right? I'm going to turn this into public safety, but what's difficult about your role, right? You work under me, what issues are you having? And they say time management or money, or, they don't have the equipment they need. And by that, what can I do to help you deal with some of those, right? What can I do to help you deal with some of these things that are in your way? Well, it sure would be nice if we could get this kind of software. I can look into that. Like maybe we can't, right? But I've just identified a problem that I didn't know that they had, right? This is just in interpersonal communication in general. I've identified a problem that they have. I've let them know that I'm interested in helping them solve that problem. I'm not being fake about it. I may have to tell them no, right? But I found out. And in my world, what they gave me in kind of this, the business world that I've had to learn so rapidly over the last 10 years is that maybe I don't know what their biggest issue is, and they're holding all this animosity about why I haven't helped them fix it and why I'm making it harder. All right, so take that to a public safety one, right? What comes to mind to me is I had this, I'll just narrow it down really quickly. I had somebody run from me. We ended up in a pretty bad fight on the side of the road, eventually got him in hand, like a really physical fight. He's cursing me. I'm cursing him. It gets very physical. I give him the back of my car. He chills out a little bit. I probably chill out a little bit, right? Because I've just dealt with this. And I get in the car and he's, you can't arrest me for this and all the stuff that we hear. And I asked him, and I'm not going to say this works for everybody, but I said, dude, why are you so angry at this life event that you caused? Like, why are you angry at me? Man, the last time that, and I don't even know exactly what the reason was, but he gave me a reason in his life that I was like, oh, crap, I'd hate the cops too, man. Like, if that was me, I'd hate every one of them, I wish I could remember because it'd make the story better, but it was something significant that made me from the front seat go, oh, I see why you hate us, Now that didn't make it okay, right? I'm not the one that hurt him, I'm not the one that made him drive this way or fight, but 10 years ago or 10 years before that, it would have been, I don't care, you're a piece of trash, this is your fault, I don't care what you think about me, mentality. And it turned into, and I just remember very clearly the drive to the jail, it turned into us having kind of an adult, cordial conversation. He wasn't real happy that he was still going to jail, right? I wasn't real happy that I had to fight him on the side of the road, but it turned into this conversation of me going, oh, you know what? Crap, that actually makes sense. I think I get it. I don't think you're right, but I get it. How many times I worked with a medic not too long ago who was having a lot of trouble with their shift partner, in the ambulance. And the shift partner was just known for being hostile and difficult and angry all the time. And so we kind of talked through this. And again, I don't want any of this to sound like it's going to solve all your worldly problems and you'll live rainbows and unicorns, with a difficult partner. But once she got to talking to him and realizing how he'd kind of gotten this way, made a lot of sense, made a lot of sense how she could talk to him.
Yeah. It goes back to, I think the great Ted Lasso said it, be curious, not judgmental,
which is hard to do. I mean, it's probably I think it's probably the hardest skill that you have to learn. And I never want people to go too far with it. Don't, like you said before, it would be awesome if we could just trust everybody until they prove us wrong. But that gets people killed sometimes. So I'm probably not going to lean on that one,
Yeah, but to bring the conversation to full circle in that decision space of, do I make a judgment here or can I be curious? There's space, right? There's a space between that stimulus and the decision that you're going to make. And I think it behooves us, kind of like what we've been talking about a little bit, with even to tie in the Stoic piece of it a little bit, that, maybe we should use emotion less.
Well, that pause
within that space.
You need to fill the space with some rational thoughts, but the pause to get there in that space is works wonders, right? It can be a miracle having that pause there. And a big problem with public safety is that we taught you not to do that, right? We taught the first day of the police academy, we watched videos of cops getting killed on dash cams, right? The first fire academy, I'm sure in the first week of fire academy, they show you how many people die from what you're doing, or how many mistakes can be made in the EMS world, right? Or how many people have been killed in the military when you joined, right? But so we create that scenario within our own agencies. If you mess up, you will die, or somebody else will die, right? Which I get it. I understand why we push it that far, through training to make you take it seriously, right? But is it reality that if you mess up, somebody dies? Probably not. I don't want it to.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do everything I can to not make that happen, right? But you giving me a stimulus and a response that I have to avoid, right? And and granted, there are sometimes you do this. Again, if you're chasing a vehicle and it wrecks out, you're not just going to walk up and be like, how's your weekend, man? Like, how's it going? Right? Like, it's going to get you hurt, right? You're going to felony traffic stop them. It's going to be loud. It's going to be violent. It's going to be, if you're serving a search warrant on a house, you don't just walk in and make yourself a sandwich. It's violent. It's speed. It's right. There is a time and place for that one, but we have told you that for every action, you need this reaction. And if you don't, somebody's going to die. So we do it to ourselves.
It's a protocolized
Yeah.
mindset, and it removes your ability to think freely within those spaces.
Well, when
sometimes.
I'm doing push-ups when I'm doing push-ups in the academy, getting told I'm a piece of crap, and then 3 weeks after the academy, I call somebody a piece of crap and get a complaint, and you wonder where that came from, right? That's exactly. And the last piece I like to say about those reactions is that we do sometimes feeling emotionless saves us, right, or helps us. We are most tactically proficient when we're our most emotionally disconnected. You can't be emotional going to all your calls. You can't. There's no way. You'll never survive. You'll never do right. And I never went to a calm scenario, right? In the academy, I never went to a domestic violence scenario where you walked in, they were mad at each other and drunk, and you said, "Did he hit you? Did she hit you? Okay, see ya." Right? That's like 99% of domestics right there. Y'all split up for the night so we don't have to come back. That never happened. Every domestic scenario I went to, 2 people had a gun, there was a knife hidden under the couch, the boyfriend came down from upstairs, 2 people had warrants, like they're all trying to hurt me, right? So guess how I act the first time I go to my first domestic? Like that. Again, important training, but we do it to ourselves as well.
And it's all to what you talked about earlier, but in a little bit different context. It's structural in your brain. You're hijacked by the limbic system, so you can't shut off
100%.
the front. You have shut off the front part of your brain, which can be a little bit more rational. Hey, Moose, Josh, do you guys have anything else? I can't think of a better note to wrap it up.
I actually do have a question, but I think I'm going to save it for next time because that was a perfect note to finish up on.
I'm good.
Hey, Doc, we really appreciate your time tonight. I can't imagine how beneficial this could be in weeks and months and years to come for folks that don't even know about this kind of stuff out there.
Awesome.
For first responders. Where can folks find you?
So a couple of easy ways. If you have Instagram, it's probably what gets updated the most. The Instagram is Dr. Trevor Wilkins, so Dr. Trevor Wilkins. You can find me on YouTube if you just search The Angry Viking Therapist or my name. Pretty easy to find me there. There's also the Facebook, that'll be connected to things like the IG. My website is theangryvikingtherapist.com. So pretty easy to find. And if you just Google that term, you're going to find me in the first, I'll be the first couple of pages. It's a trademarked name that came from college world. So it's pretty easy to find me, but I most connect with people on IG just because it's the easier space. But even the website will send you to things like emails or ways that you can contact me with any questions. And any of the services that I can provide.
And on that note, you've got some programs out there where folks can connect with you and like-minded individuals that are all kind of in the same pursuit of things. And that's through your website.
If you go to the website, there's a couple of things, but the kind of lowest tier level is I've created an app over the years that gives you daily stuff about what we just talked about, some of that ABC reflection you have to do for yourself, a community. It's a secure community. It's not on social media, a community of like-minded individuals. They're kind of going through a lot of the same stuff, and all the way up to, being able to contact me one-on-one is on the website.
So I just, in case people actually Google it, like I just did, it says here, so option 3, for example, it says take your mindset method program to the next level with our option 3 package. You'll receive app access, weekly 60-minute group chat meetings with Dr. Wilkins, and one 60-minute one-on-one Zoom call with with you each month. I imagine that probably caps at some point, right? Or is it a one-time payment for monthly stuff?
Yeah.
So it's that price a month?
Yep. But you get all that together. Yep.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure.
And some people, whether they're just not interested in part of it or just want one, there's ways in there to just have a one-on-one session too. Yep.
Yeah, I see that. Cool.
Well, folks, that was Dr. Trevor Wilkins, also known as the Angry Viking Therapist, brought to you with Alert Medic 1 and Moose and Josh.
I got one more question. I'm sorry.
He's got another question.
Can you do EMDR virtually? You can do
Absolutely,
EMDR virtually?
Yep.
All right. Sorry. Cody, go ahead now, buddy.
No, it's your turn. That's your turn. You already stole my thunder.
All right. Well, hey, Dr. Wilkins, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was really cool, really enlightening, and we'd love to have you back. Just a reminder: don't disconnect. We're just going to stop recording, okay? But for all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening. We really couldn't do the work that we do without you guys and your support and your suggestions and your advice. We're all on one team here, and the goal is to do two things, right? Take care of you guys and take care of the patients we take care of each and every day. Make sure you follow us on our Instagram page. We're doing a ton of work on it. Well, not we, Josh and Cody are doing a ton of work on our social media, and Ken. So make sure you follow us at AlertMedic1 on Instagram. Shoot us an email at admin@alertmedic1.com if there's any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, ideas. We want to hear them. And until next time, folks, that's all for now. Have a good night.